The Liberals have unveiled their new platform. It includes $57 billion in new spending promises and $94 billion in new deficit spending. To talk more about it is one of our regular political contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me via Skype from Toronto. Now, Brian, the new spending does not even factor in pharmacare and guaranteed income for new parents.
Yeah, so those figures of 57 billion in new spending and 94 billion in deficit spending would just increase them by quite a bit, because I don't even know what you would price tag you would put on saying a guaranteed income program for new parents would be. This is for people that don't qualify for EI, and rather than just saying, okay, you're able to get maternal or paternal leave benefits, oh no, it's going to be a guaranteed income program for them. Well, hold on. Does that mean you're going to expand it everywhere else? That's going to be a big ticket item, Hal. That's going to cost billions of dollars. But we do know that both the expert panel that the Liberals put forward on pharmacare, they said that a national pharmacare program would cost about $15 billion. The parliamentary budget officer said it'd be about $24 billion. Both of those figures are per year, and the Liberals are promising a national pharmacare program, but it's not costed out in their platform. So why does this matter? $94 billion of new deficit spending at a time when the economy is doing pretty good, when the Liberals are running on how great the economy is. Imagine how much they will have to spend if the economy takes a downturn. Keynesian economics is that you spend when governments spend extra when times are bad, you try and stimulate the economy. That's the theory. And then when times are good, you pay down the deficits from the bad times and save up for a rainy day, because there's always a boom and bust cycle with economies. They can't grow perpetually. It's not a perpetual motion machine. And under the Liberals, they've decided, nope, deficit spending all the time. When the Harper Conservatives were in power during the Great Recession, they denounced deficit spending and said, this is awful. You're spending more than we're taking in. And now they're doing it when times are good. It just makes you realize that this is not the Liberal Party of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, who slayed the deficits that had plagued us from the early days of Pierre Trudeau's governments. And he ran them up so much that it took until the 90s to get rid of deficits that started around the year that Justin and I were born, 1971.
Speaking of Mr. Trudeau, he's talking more gun control, Brian. Now, you talked to him about it recently, and he could not differentiate between an AR-15 and any other semi-automatic weapon, which may still be legal.
Yeah, so he's been out there pushing, and he did one day, Monday he was out with doctors who say there's a national health emergency because of gun crime and shootings, and we've got to have a national handgun ban. He's not proposing that. He met with mayors from around the Toronto area on Tuesday. They also called for a national handgun ban, but he won't do that. But he will ban the AR-15. He says, we've got to ban this rifle. And I asked him, I said, well, this has no history of being used as a crime gun in Canada. In fact, I've been able to find one example of it being used as a crime gun in Canada, and that was a botched mob shooting. It wasn't even a legal registered rifle, because AR-15s are restricted rifles. They still must be registered, just like a handgun. He is going forward with pushing forward on a ban, and he talked about how many shootings there are in the United States. Well, that's not Canada. So then I asked him, I said, under your plan, you're going to ban the AR-15, which is just a standard semi-automatic rifle. I said, there'll be hundreds of other models of semi-automatic rifles still available. Can you tell me how they're different in terms of how they operate? And he couldn't. He talked about the RCMP and relying on experts, and that politicians shouldn't be in charge of deciding which weapons to ban. But he had just announced that he wants to ban one specific rifle, the AR-15. So he's not arguing on gun control from a stance of policy or facts. He's doing it based on fear, because what he wants to do, Hal, effectively is scare suburban mothers who don't know anything about guns to say, there's a gun crime problem, which there is in cities across the country. He'll do something about it. Well, the gangsters are shooting each other up and shooting up our streets with illegal handguns. Banning a rifle not used in crime won't solve that problem.
Yeah, I tell you, farmers and ranchers here in Alberta will not be too pleased with that. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says he will cut foreign aid by 25%, Brian. Scheer says Canada should not be supporting various dictatorships.
Yeah, I mean, can you believe that we've given $7 million to China in the last year? That we've given millions of dollars to North Korea. I think it's about $5 million to North Korea. We've given millions to Iran. We've given $200,000 to Vladimir Putin's Russia. I mean, sure, it's only $200,000, but why are we giving any money to Putin's Russia? Then there's the other side. So he wants to take away money from dictatorships and despots and say, look, we're just going to stop funding these people that are not in line with our values, but we're also going to stop funding. This is if there's a conservative government, we will stop funding wealthy countries. I was shocked to find out that Canada's foreign aid included $2 million to Italy. It included $6 million to Mexico, along with millions to Brazil and Argentina and other countries that are high up on the wealth index that are developed nations. Brazil's a competitor on many, many fronts, from agriculture to aerospace with Canada, and we're giving them around $5 million a year. That makes no sense. So this is an election promise that I think will find a lot of support with the voting public, even if it's roundly denounced by most in the media who will say this is an awful thing to do. Scheer says that conservative government will focus on the poorest countries, that we don't need to be giving this money off to countries that don't need it or aren't actually sharing it with the people in need. You can see that the people in North Korea would be in need, but do you really think that that aid is getting to them instead of the dictatorship?
It appears as though the number of people crossing the border illegally from the United States into Quebec is back up once again, and a new poll suggests the Liberals received a failing grade in this regard. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so both July and August saw the numbers go up based or compared to the same period the year before. Overall, compared to 2018, we're down a bit. We're just over 10,000 in the first 8 months of the year. We have the numbers up until the end of August, and we're at about between 10 and 11,000 right now. The past 2 years, we've had 18 to 19,000 people a year. So all told, more than 50,000 people have crossed the border so far into Canada illegally, and since Justin Trudeau put out his infamous tweet. Was partnering with DART, the polling firm headed up by John Wright, and said, well, let's ask people about this. And we asked them specifically, how do you feel the government is doing when it comes to, traditional legal immigration, passing grade? About 70% there. 55% say they're handling the refugee file well. But on the issue of people coming across the border at what the government refers to as irregular crossings, and most people call illegal, uh, the public was about 68% said we give them a failing grade. 70% said this should be the number one issue that our politicians focus on in the immigration system is fixing this. So that when you see numbers like that, Hal, that goes across party lines. That tells you it's not just conservatives, it's not just New Democrats. There are people from all parties that are saying, I don't really like what I'm seeing here. It's not that Canadians are against immigration, but they want it to be done in a way that follows the rules.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is promising 500,000 new childcare spaces. What I want to know, answer to two questions. Number one, is there that much of a need? And number two, who's going to pay for that?
Well, you will pay for it, and I'll pay for it, and the crew will pay for it, and the viewers will pay for it. Is there that much of a need? It depends on how you view this. I've been following the daycare file for a very long time now, and what we continually hear is that there's a crisis in daycare, that it costs too much, that there aren't enough spaces. When you hear that, you need to ask what type of spaces are people looking for? Because when you ask parents directly, and this has been shown in poll after poll, studies by groups like Cardis, the Vanier Institute for the Family, and they ask parents, what do you want for childcare options? And their first choice would be, if they can afford it, they'd like one parent to stay home. Failing that, they'd like a relative, be it a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or another family member to look after their kids. After that, it goes to the lady down the street that runs the community daycare. Often we've all dealt with this. A woman in her home opens it up because she's got some kids and she looks after a few others. The bottom end of the rung, the last option is the institutionalized daycare centers provided by governments. And that's what the NDP wants. They want to provide 500,000 of these. The Liberals want to provide 250,000, and the Conservatives want to give you a break on whatever your childcare expenses are and allow you to decide. The NDP and the Liberals are trying to say that we want to go this route. They really admire the Quebec model. As someone that has lived with that model and covered it, I can tell you how you end up with the system getting unionized. They threaten to go on strike, and then forget about a school strike. Imagine trying to find care for a 6-month-old or a 1.5-year-old on short notice. That's what parents have to deal with. So it's the model that governments and bureaucrats and unionists prefer, but it's not the model that parents prefer.
We are less than 3 weeks until the federal election, Brian. New poll numbers suggest that Andrew Scheer and the Tories are opening up a lead on the Liberals.
Yeah, so a couple of polls on this. Both Nanos tracking poll has put the Conservatives ahead for the past few days, as well as Andrew Scheer outpacing Justin Trudeau on preferred prime minister. But also Ipsos, the granddaddy of polling companies in this country, having a 37-34 lead for the Conservatives over the Liberals. So this is interesting on a number of fronts, including that around the 905, that mythical band of seats around Toronto, the Conservatives are in the lead in key ridings where the last election they were won by either side by less than 5%. The Conservatives are in the lead in those ridings. So it may seem like Andrew Scheer doesn't have a hope. I keep hearing that, but when I look at the numbers, everything from deserves to be reelected, is the country on the right track, wrong track, those underlying numbers have not changed in months. They do not favor the Liberals. Things are not going well for Justin Trudeau, but he remains in this race. Don't count him out yet. This is a knife fight, as one pollster put it to me. This is going to go riding by riding, knives out. Everyone's battling, and the victor will be determined on October 21st.
Do you think a big reason why the Tories may be increasing in popularity is because Andrew Scheer maybe took Doug Ford aside and said, "Hey, buddy, ease up on the cuts, will you?" Especially here in Ontario.
I think that maybe 4 or 5 months ago, Doug Ford was a real issue in Ontario. It was in the middle of the battle over cuts to, or not even cuts, but changes to autism funding. And it could become an issue once again because the education workers unions, be it support workers or teachers, they're in the middle of contract talks. The support workers have already started work to rule. The teachers could be on strike soon. But the idea that Doug Ford is the negative factor dragging them down just is not borne out by the polling. An Angus Reid poll looked at that. And there was some reporting that said, look, 85% of people that say that their provincial government will determine how they vote won't vote for Andrew Scheer. Well, when you look at the numbers, those people were all NDP voters or Liberal voters in the last provincial election. Andrew Scheer still holds 83% of the people that voted for Doug Ford in the last provincial election. That's a pretty good retention rate after a tumultuous first year of the Ford government. And it also gives him about 35% of the Ontario electorate, which is what the polls have him at in Ontario. So the Ford factor has been wildly overstated by a media that is determined to find fault with Doug Ford when he wakes up in the morning. Whatever side of the bed Doug Ford wakes up on, he woke up on the wrong side of the bed, according to most of the media in Ontario.
Brian, the French leaders' debate is set for later today. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau won't be skipping out on this one. I'll re-ask you that. Brian, the French leaders' debate is set for later today, and Liberal leader Justin Trudeau won't be skipping out on this one.
No, he won't. So he skipped out on the McLean City TV debate. That was the first one early in September, shortly after the writ was dropped, or actually just before the writ was dropped. And then he decided that he would skip the Monk debate, and that was canceled. That should have been yesterday, and that's why Andrew Scheer made his foreign policy announcement about cutting foreign aid on Tuesday, was because that was the day the Monk debate was supposed to happen. This debate that he's agreed to go into is not one of the official government-sanctioned debates. And remember, at the beginning, Justin Trudeau said, oh, no, I don't need to do any other debates. I'll do one in English and I'll do one in French because those are the official debates by the Leaders' Debate Commission. And then he got too much pressure in Quebec and he decided to do TVA. You and I both know the power of TVA in Quebec. It's the most popular TV network in French Canada. And he succumbed to that pressure, and he's doing their debate. This should actually anger people across English-speaking Canada, because the leader of this country agreed to do 2 debates in French and 1 debate in English. 25% of the population speaks French, 75% speak English, and he's doing 2 for 1. I think he's going to get beaten up on an awful lot of issues, including perhaps the border. We'll have to wait and see until after the debate has finished, but it's it's an insult to the rest of the country that he's decided to do this. In 2015, Stephen Harper agreed to 3 debates in English, 2 in French, and Justin Trudeau complained about that. Now he's doing 2 in French, 1 in English. That's wrong.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how this plays out. One of our regular political contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.